Picking the right resin 3D printer can feel overwhelming. So many options, so many specs, so many different models. And if it's your first resin 3D printer, you might not understand half of what is said in the reviews. Two quick hard truths to get us started on this topic. The difference between resin printers are starting to become very minor, and the best printer isn't the same for everyone. In this video, I won't just list a lot of great printers. You will learn how to decide for yourself which printer is perfect for your needs. It's about discovering what your use case actually is and what features to look for and which ones you should avoid paying extra money for. By the end, you'll know exactly which features matters for you and which are just marketing fluff you should avoid. Quality of the print. The number one reason you're looking for a resin printer and not an FDM printer is likely because of the quality of the print. So it's very reasonable of you to be focused on the detail level and whether or not your printer will produce a great result. First up, several elements will go into determining the end quality print you get. The precision of the Z-axis, so this is the up and down motion. On most printers, this is extremely accurate, so it's very unlikely that this will be the bottleneck of print quality. The resin you use is another factor, but these are also almost all pretty great. The difference is not in the quality of the print as much, it can be, but the difference is more in what sort of properties your model will get, how flexible it is, how tough it is, how brittle it is. You can see more about different resins in this video. What we have left is mainly the screen and the UV light source of the printer. When the printer cures a layer, the pixel let light through in a specific pattern. If the light has a lot of bleed, meaning that the light does not only expose the pattern it's supposed to, but also bleeds a bit from there, you will have a slight blur and it can ruin the details a bit. For various reasons, it's extremely hard to measure the precision of the light source, so you won't see a great deal of comparison between printers in terms of how great the light source is. New and better light types and sources are made all the time, but it's unlikely to be something you can buy a printer because of the great light source. You just have to sort of trust it, really. It would be great if we could compare how the light source performs across different brands and different models, but right now, no one's doing it. We actually left with just one thing we can reliably compare print quality across brands and printers on. That's the screen. The more precise the pattern it can make, the more precise it can cure a layer. So you might be thinking higher pixel count on the screen will therefore be better precision or better print quality. But pixel count is only half the story. Imagine a printer with 100 pixels on the screen and another printer with 50 pixels on the screen. Which one is more precise? Well, there's no way to know unless you know how large each pixel is on the screen. Maybe the printer with 100 pixels on the screen is twice as big as the one with 50 pixels on it. They would each have the same pixel size. So in theory, they would print at exactly the same precision. An example where this is sort of the case is the Saturn 1 and the Mars 1, where they had vastly different screen size, but where the pixel size on each was the same. They both had what is called the XY resolution of 50 microns. The lower this XY resolution is, the better. Sometimes the pixels aren't the same size on the X and the Y. In that case, just count the highest. For a good while now, printers have improved on the XY resolution size of the pixels. We are now at a point where the small printers often have a pixel size of about 20 microns, and the medium-sized printers are getting below 30 microns. The sweet spot will often be 30 microns and printing at a 30 micron layer height. So each layer is 30 microns large. So actually, most printers in the small and mid category will have extremely minor differences in print quality. If you're buying a small or medium-sized newer printer, you should completely ignore any marketing about 8K, 16K, 4K, 1 billion K. The difference between a 30 micron printer and a 20 micron printer is very low. They will all print with very good quality, and in a blind test you would have very little chance of guessing what model what print comes from what printer. And it's very unlikely we're gonna get to 10 microns. And even if we did, I don't think it's very good to print at that layer height. It introduces a ton of other problems with the resin. So stick to 30 microns or 20 microns and it's pretty damn great. But that leaves us in a bit of a conundrum here. How are you supposed to pick the perfect printer for you when quality is not the issue? If the difference between printers is so minor, this is not how you pick your perfect printer. So we need to look for something else. I think one of the most important aspects of picking a printer is the price and the size. Price is certainly not something reviewers can use a lot of time on. That's because when a printer is reviewed, it is often in the pre-order stage of the printer life, right when it's coming out. The price is known for that point in time. There's a price and then there's the pre-order price, which is actually the real price, which is lower and all that. But that price quickly drops and the market shifts so fast, it's very, very hard to talk about the price in reviews. So comparing printers and price against each other falls on you when you are buying one. It can be extremely hard to figure out if a sale on a printer is actually a good deal. I have made a table where I have all of the consumer resin printers and I track the price, the best price I see on each printer. I mainly made this for myself because it was really hard for me to recommend printers and whether or not they were actually on sale. You can find a link for the table down below. Anyway, what you should be doing is this. Figure out your use case and feature set you're looking for. Find the 2-3 printers in that segment and buy one of them when they are on a good real sale. You can use my table to sort and filter the printers for the features you're looking for. So while print quality is no longer really the concern when looking at feature set, what should you be looking for? Price is one thing, but the size of the printer is one of the few aspects where I actually think you can buy a printer and later sort of regret your purchase. When I'm talking about size, I'm not talking about the footprint of the printer, but the area of the printer you can use for printing, also called the build volume. This is determined mainly by the screen and the build plate. Broadly speaking, I think we can lump consumer resin printers into 3 categories: small, mid, and large. Small size printers ranging from 6 to 7 inch screens, they cost about $150 to $300. These are the Elgo Mars, the Anycubic Photon Mono, and the Frozen Mini types of printers. The build volume on the Z-axis, so how high the print is often fairly good. But you will quickly become restrained on the X and the Y-axis. This means that bigger models will often not really fit on your print space and you will have to print them in several pieces. And as you maybe know, it can be hard to get resin to print dimensionally accurate, so it fits together and the print will warp a bit when you cure it. So gluing together a multi-piece model is not something I really recommend as a thing you should do very often. So if there is a chance you want to print bigger models a lot, I think moving up to a mid-sized printer is likely a very wise choice. Back in the days, the mid-sized printers were a bit more cumbersome to work with and were largely not recommended for beginners. These days, there has been some improvement making that less of an issue. The build plate is unlikely to be warped, the FEPs are better, so you won't have a lot of issues there. It will require more space and it costs a bit more. I will categorize a mid-sized printer being about 9 to 10 inches of screen, but they can vary a bit in that size and they can also vary a lot in cost, starting at maybe $200 and going up to $1,000 plus. In this category, we have the Elgo Satin line, the Anycubic Mono X, M3, M5, M7, and other stuff. The Frozen Sonic, the Uniformation stuff, the Hagias, Reflex stuff, and so on. Here it can be relevant to take a look at the XY resolution and be certain you hit about 30 microns or below. Some of the older printers are 50 microns, and they are starting to get a bit dated. With these, you can fit a ton of 32mm models on a build plate and you can print some pretty large stuff. If you really want to have a lot of space to work with, you can buy a big printer with 12-inch screen and above. These will most likely set you back $700 plus, and you can find them in the lines like the Elgo Jupiter, the Photon Max, Frozen Sonic Mega, Uniformation, heck yes. But Peter, this did not really narrow down my choices very much, did it? Fair enough, fair enough. We need to talk about some of the other important features. Size alone only narrows it down so much. Right now you have sort of a price point you're looking for, and you're looking in a size category. Let's look at some of the features I think you should be keeping an eye for when buying a printer. The first one is a heated VAT. This is the first feature I actually think you should worry about, other than size and price. If you're going to print in a room where the ambient temperature is sub 22 Celsius, or if you're printing in a room where there will be swings in temperature if you're printing overnight, then getting a heating solution is one of the first things I think you should be looking for. Even if the temperatures are pretty good and stable where you're going to print in resin, having a very high stable temperature can really help out to avoid failures and funky defects when printing. If you're starting out, it's a big bonus. I'm not a big fan of the various sort of external heating solution like a brew belt and external heater besides the printer. They're not very efficient because they need to heat up all the space instead of just the resin, and they are all kind of janky. The Elegoo heater really caused some issues by making the rail on the printer constantly change temperature up and down, leading to extremely bad layer lines. Getting a printer with a heated VAT was kind of hard at some point, but now they're more and more available. Now, as a beginner, I think you should be asking yourself why you shouldn't get a heated VAT instead of if you should get a heated VAT. I think it makes that much a difference for beginners. The heated VAT takes a common fail point out of the equation and makes printing easier and can give you a bit more detail from your resin. I have a separate tab in my table where you can just see the printers with a heated VAT, or you can just check out links in the description for printers. From this point onwards, we are sort of fine-tuning the selection on the printer you are going to buy. Here are some of the features I would pay extra attention to and might pay a bit extra for. The first one is tempered glass. I kinda hate screen protectors. I hate to put them on. I love when they're on and they save me from breaking a screen, but often I kinda forget to put them on because I'm lazy, and then I break the screen anyway because I forgot to put it on. It's not great. But all of this means I really love printers that have tempered glass above the screen. It simply acts as a built-in screen protector that's reusable. Got some resin on it, gently heat it up and use your sharp plastic scraper to get it off. Another thing that's really important is anti-aliasing. If you print large flat surfaces, anti-aliasing is pretty essential, and some even say that a printer without it is not really a resin printer. For some unknown reason, some printers only take a file format where anti-aliasing is not supported or bugged. Yes, I'm looking at you, GU format and Elegoo Mars Non-Ultra. Why? Oh, this is just really stupid, and it shouldn't be the job of viewers to check if anti-aliasing is actually working on a printer. It should just work all the bloody time. But here we are. So watch out for this trap, as it's something that might not be mentioned in all of the reviews, and it can really take you off guard. Another trap that you should avoid is getting a build plate that has an extremely stupid design. Back in the days, the adhesion to the build plate could be a factor when you bought a new printer. Nowadays, I think all of the build plates are pretty good in terms of getting things to stick on it. A thing I tend to look for on a build plate is how it's attached to the printer and how you level it. The best mechanism for attaching the build plate is a strong latch, but the knob also works fine. It's not a big issue. But how many screws are on the build plate? Elegoo for a long time have had the 2-screw mechanism. This is mainly an issue on their medium-sized printers like the Saturn, and it meant that people had a hard time getting a good level going, as the 2 screws would slightly misalign when you screwed them in, and the build plate would tighten up a bit, and that lead to failed prints. So 4 screws are better than 2. Sometimes we get new printers where the build plate is just horribly designed. Try and speak to people that have a Saturn 4 Ultra about their post-process. That thing traps resin in there. You need to factor that in when you're doing your post-process, and it's a bit of a pain. Ideally, you want something where the resin can flow down from the build plate when it's resting after the print. And to get this out of the way early, no, I don't think auto-leveling is worth paying for right now on the resin printers. On some printers, it actually works fine, and that's great. But when it doesn't work, it can be hard to tune it, and you need to be able to manually tune the leveling if the auto leveling is not working. Then we come to things I keep an eye on, but I don't worry about that much, and I wouldn't really pay that much extra for. The rail. So the rail needs to be firm, it needs to be exact, and the motor needs to be exact, and the dual linear rails are better than one rail, and the ball bearings are better than not ball bearing. This is mostly important if you're printing on a very big printer or printing very big things. The FEP. The type PFA is what I prefer, but you can always change it, and you will change the FEP at some point. PFA is called a lot of weird things. NFEP for not FEP, FEP2, picture release film, and other things. They are all sort of the same. The ACF is fine, but not great. It's mainly sort of a marketing speed thing, but it can have an impact on quality of the print, so I'm not a fan. The cover of the printer. You take off the lid and then you need to put it somewhere while you're working with the printer. Often I put it on top of another printer, but it just means you need space to do this. So if you're space constrained, this might be a problem. The flip open is likely the best model. The cover stays on the printer, but often it requires a bit of space behind the printer, which could be a problem in your printing space. If your printer is truly big, handles on the cover can be a good feature. If you might have sunlight hitting your printing area, the UV cover of the screen becomes more relevant. I found that most that I've worked with block UV light very good, with the exception of the blue cover on the Anycubic. I sometimes have random sunlight hitting the printer, and on that printer it would actually cure a fine sheet of resin on top in the vat. So not great. Another thing to look for is getting spare parts for the printer you buy. If you're buying an older printer, is it going to be possible to get a replacement screen in the coming 1 to 3 years? As an example, right now it can be hard to get a screen for the Saturn II. You might need to look for other manufacturers to get it. A thing to also consider is how much is the replacement screen going to cost. If you're buying a very big printer, that screen is going to cost a lot more. And screens, they break down, either because you do something stupid or they simply fail after printing a lot. And if you hate the idea of your screen breaking, it could be an idea to look into a projector-based printer called a DLP printer. Sadly, they have gone out of style, so you can't get a lot of them and the models are getting old. But a projector will last so long compared to a screen, and you can't really break the screen here because there is none. There's just glass and a printer way down below in the printer. Sadly, the print quality you can get from a DLP right now is about 50 microns, so it's not amazing, but I truly wish that we would see better, more advanced DLP printers in the future. Another thing to consider when getting a printer is the support you're going to get. So what's the warranty like on the brand you're getting? Chances are you might need to be in contact with support, which is never great. I have had dealing with all of the big brands, and I think their support falls in the okay territory. I rate Elegoo a bit higher than the others, but your mileage will certainly vary depending on what your problem is and the person you will be in contact with. A feature you might not know about is whether or not the printer can do RERF, so Resin Exposure Range Finder. Being able to print multiple objects in the same print at multiple different exposure times might sound a bit weird, but once you learn how to calibrate, it's a feature you will start to really love. This makes it just plain faster to figure out that perfect exposure setting for your resin printer and space, if it works, that is. If you are the type to buy one type of resin, use that resin over and over again, this feature is not super relevant for you. It's mainly just a time saver when you're calibrating resin. But if you want to experiment and change resin all the time, this is a feature that you will start to appreciate very quickly. It's a feature that reviewers very much like because they are testing stuff over and over again, but for the average consumer, it doesn't matter that much. On the Anycubic lines, it has been there for a long time. It has been missing on the Elegoo stuff, but it's starting to trickle in. A factor that I worry about a lot is fan noise. Sadly, this is not a thing reviewers have been super concerned about, but it really is a pet peeve of mine. The fans in the printers are small and they're bad and they have the worst pitch in the world. And for the longest time, the fans would kick on and run as soon as you started the machine, even when it was not printing. On most printers now, they don't run when the printer is idle, but it still makes a lot of noise. And the noise from the motor is also an issue. Resin printers are not silent. A tank max indicator is a small thing that can really help you out in the start. On some tanks you can see an estimate on how much resin is in the tank. This is super awesome for figuring out if you need to top it off before you hit print, because your slicer will give you sort of an average on how much volume of resin you need to finish the print. Let's get to things I don't really rate that highly and I would not pay extra for. Wi-Fi connection or a cloud solution. First of all, it's often very janky. The implementation is likely bad, it can be hard to get them on your Wi-Fi network, the apps are crap, does the file really get there, is it corrupted when it gets there, does it even work? Is the cloud solution even supported in the slicer you want to use, or are you locked into using a brand slicer that's really bad? Also, often what happens is that you send your file to the cloud and then it's downloaded to your printer from the cloud. So now you have a printer hooked up to a cloud solution, often with pure security, and do you really want that? And anyway, you need to get to your printer, check if there's something on the build plate and stir the resin in that before you hit print anyway. So you need to get to your printer. It's not some magical solution where you can just print from your computer. All in all, I think it gets so cumbersome that I would rather just use the USB drive and take the file with me. Most of the time, I think the Wi-Fi cloud solution are a bit of a trap. Now, LAN connection, directly loading your file from your PC to a printer, now we're talking. I think that's pretty great. But sadly, it's getting rare and rare because, well, they likely want to harvest your data or I don't know. Air filters. I don't really rate them that highly. You need to change the active carbon in them or they will quickly stop doing anything at all. They mainly do something for the smell. They're fine, but they're just a bonus and they can be a false sense of security. Do you need a camera in your printer? While making a time lapse of your print is cool and all, is it something you're going to pay extra for? Yes, you can monitor your print, but unless you're printing huge prints, you might not even see the fail happen. Oh, and to see with the camera, you likely need a light source. Is there light in your printer? Can you have the cover off to light on it? Will that light cure resin? For most people, I think the cameras are a bit of a gimmick. And speaking of gimmicks, resin pumps. Unless you are paying a premium, these are often janky and not very good. While they sound nice that they can put in resin when you need it, they often become a trap because they don't work as intended or they give you extra maintenance and cleaning up to do. Oftentimes it's just much simpler to pour in the resin yourself. This one might be controversial, but I think speed is also a gimmick. As I see it, there are two types of speed printers right now. Either you use ACF film, super low viscosity and extremely brittle resin, and you go with a high layer size. Then you can print at high speed, and that's what Anycubic has done. It doesn't work that great. For me, it goes very counter to everything that's great about resin printing. If I wanted to print at a 100 micron layer height, I would just do an FDM print instead. The other method of speed printing is tilting the VAT, making the tug of war between the build plate and the FEP that much easier and also faster. If you really want to print fast, the tilting VAT is the way to go. But I think speed is highly overrated when it comes to resin printing. I can print much faster than I can paint or that I need miniatures. So for me, speed is something I want to maximize on my FDM printers because they are slow. In resin printing, you can print the whole layer in a few seconds, no matter how much you have on the build plate. So print times of resin is not that high anyway. For most print I do, it takes maximum of 16 hours, and I think that's completely fine. So I urge you to think about why it's important for you to print faster. Is it really part of your use case, or do you just think it's cool and fun? I would certainly not pay extra for the speed features, but sometimes they just come with your printer anyway. Speaking of things that just comes with your printers anyway, smart stuff. The AI wars will sadly slowly be moving into resin printing. For the most part, I'm not a big fan of the smart features we have seen so far. Yes, it's cool that your printer can check if there's debris down in the vat, but what happens when you rely on the feature and it doesn't work? Or what happens when the sensor is not working and constantly giving you an error? Yes, these features can be helpful for beginners, but so far the implementation has been not super great, and I haven't seen something I would recommend to beginners to seek out. They are just a nice bonus, nothing else. Printers I would actually recommend. By now you should have a pretty good idea on what size of printer you want, the price you want, the features you're looking for, and what features to ignore. Let's try and look at 3 examples of specific use cases and what printer I think are viable in each case. The first use case is a true beginner without a lot of space and without a lot of budget to spare. So you're just starting out and your budget is small and you don't know if this is really something you're gonna be very much into. You want to dip your toes into resin printing, but you don't want to spend too much. Your plan is mainly to print small objects with the occasional bigger model. So you're looking for a very bare bones printer without a ton of extra stuff, so the price is low. I would filter my resin table based on price first, so you can see the cheapest options. Then I would glance at micron size of the pixels and sort of the extra features. And here I would likely go for the Mars 4 Ultra or the Photon Mono 4. Yes, the Mars 4 Non-Ultra is cheaper, but it still doesn't work with anti-aliasing. If space was not an issue, I might check out the Saturn 3, as you get a ton of printer for very little money. Notice how when price is the biggest factor, these are not the newest models we're looking for. We're actually looking for last year's series because they're so much cheaper. Another use case could be printing in a space where heat is a big issue, either because of the weather or you're printing in a shed outside or something like that. I would find the tab with heated VAT, and from there I would need to decide if the closed ecosystem and price point of the Hagias printers would be something I would be into. There's also the Uniformation printers, but Uniformation is kind of in a bit of a shitstorm right now, and I wouldn't really pre-order anything from them as is. In the cheaper range, you have the battle between the Saturn 4 Ultra 16K and the M7 Pro. Both are good printers. You would be happy with both, I think. Then there's the use case where you, for me at least, I think it's much better for you to know how to look for feature set you want in a printer, instead of being told what printers you should buy. Now I think you know how to pick the perfect printer for you. Check out this video about why I think buying a printer in 2025 is a great year to buy a resin printer.